In last week's video, I gave a review of the first of my acquisitions from the Diamond Select Star Wars 7-inch scale line. The figure in question, of course, was Boba Fett. And if you saw that video, you'll know that I talked a little bit about how long it's taken for me to get hold of these figures in the UK. But Boba Fett was certainly worth the wait because he was an excellent figure and actually caught me by surprise by how good he was. So today, I will be taking a look at the Stormtrooper to see how he measures up. So to start with, looking at the packaging, again, this is exactly the same packaging as we saw with the Boba Fett. This is a Disney Store exclusive, and you can see that sticker in the top right hand corner. But the packaging in the UK differs quite significantly from the US. In the US, they have these big, oversized clamshell packaging, which is very similar to the Marvel Select line for those who are familiar with those figures. But these UK releases have come in this kind of flat, oblong box, which for the most part in the front of the box is just a window display. There's not a lot going on here aside from the Star Wars logo. The rest of the packaging is pretty bland really, it's not particularly exciting, but this window display still makes it very displayable and presentable. And behind the figure is an inlay, which has a large symbol of the Empire printed on it. So it's quite nice to see the difference between this figure and the Boba Fett figure, which obviously had that assassin's or bounty hunter sort of symbol, which is pretty cool. On the side of the packaging, we have an image of the Stormtrooper here, which looks pretty cool, looks quite nice. If you start stacking these up with other figures in the line, they start to look fairly presentable if you're stacking them on a shelf, say. Whilst the reverse of the packaging is pretty dull, really. We have an image of the figure and all the bits and pieces he comes with, and not a lot else. But I'm pleased to say that once the figure is liberated from its packaging, he's immediately striking because he's a very impressive figure. I was initially hesitant about investing in this line because I already felt I had a pretty decent collection of Black Series figures at 6-inch. However, I have to say the 7-inch scale works a lot better. You feel like you're getting a lot more for your money and it just allows for a lot more detail and articulation. The sculpting on this figure is pretty much perfect. I think all the dimensions look uncannily accurate, and whilst there are very limited paint applications on this figure, where they are applied perfectly. There's no smudging or blaring, it all looks really neat and really solid. And whilst this costume is a fairly simple design, the attention to detail is still there. I really love all the bits and pieces on the lower torso there. We can see the various dots. The utility belt is very nicely sculpted and molded as a separate piece that goes around him. And it feels like we have a really authentic sculpt. It feels like we have a miniaturized version of what we see on screen. And to be honest, as a collector, there can't be any higher praise. Now on his belt, he does have a gun holster. Now, we'll come back to this a bit later on when we start looking at the accessories. I like that it's there, but I do have a few gripes with it. So first off, let's look at the articulation. He's got a ball-jointed head, so of course he can look all the way around, he can spin his head 360 degrees, he can also look up and down, and move his head from side to side. Now there are definitely limitations because of the sculpt of the helmet, but what we can do with it seems to be pretty authentic to what we can see Stormtroopers do on screen, if not giving us a little bit more than they could actually do in real life. So I'm completely happy with this. I think this is a really good joint. It works very well. Now he's also got ball jointed shoulders. Really pleasingly though, those shoulder pads don't get in the way. In fact, they can pop off and then pop back on again. So thankfully there's no hindrance to this articulation whatsoever. He's also got the bicep swivel followed up by a pin swivel at the elbow, meaning of course that the lower arm can rotate 360 degrees, but it can also hinge forwards and backwards and bend roughly 90 degrees. There's also another pin swivel at the wrist. And the same principle is true here. It can spin right the way around if you wanted to, but it also hinges in and out. Now, it can hinge in a good distance, but you'll notice that on the backhand there is a plate there of armour which does hinder the articulation because it's moulded into the hand. Now in his chest he has another ball joint which allows him to rotate all the way around, move forward, move side to side and spin from side to side as well. So this is a pretty healthy joint. It allows for a lot of articulation, a great range of motion, very dynamic, which is great stuff, and it looks relatively seamless too. And you'll notice there goes the shoulder pad popping off, and as you can see, snaps on very easily, which is great, and it feels nice and secure too. Meanwhile, in the lower body, he's got hinged hips so the legs kick out to the side. There's also an upper thigh swivel as well, so his leg can spin around. All of this is very neatly hidden behind the various armour pieces, so it looks really seamless when you're posing him. And the legs can kick forwards and backwards a fair distance too, which is great. There's another pin swivel at the knee as well. So again, the lower leg can rotate from side to side, right the way around if you want it to, and it can also hinge to about 90 degrees, which is pretty cool stuff. And then finally in the ankle we have more articulation. We have another ball joint there, so the foot of course can hinge forwards and backwards, and it can also move from side to side, but also swivel. It can pivot on the ankle as well, which is great. And one of the things I really love about this line so far is the amount of extras they come with. So the Stormtrooper comes fully loaded with an extra 3 hands, his blaster rifle, his pistol blaster. There's an attachable blaster bolt effect piece that screws into the nozzle of any of these weapons, and then he has his long range blaster rifle, and then finally he comes with one of those little remote droids that follows them around on the Death Star. I think this is a really nice touch, albeit a completely unexpected one, but I really like having a world building prop like this to really just help flesh out any dioramas that may be built in the future. And the piece itself is nicely moulded and sculpted. There's no articulation, sadly the wheels don't move around or anything like that. It is just one solid piece, but there is some attention to detail in the sense that they try to paint some of the buttons on the side, and I think for the most part this is just a nice little extra. And as you'd hope, he has no problems whatsoever holding his various weapons. He's able to hold these weapons in his grip nice and tight. There's no danger of them slipping through his fingers or not quite being able to get his finger onto the trigger. It looks perfect when it's in his hand, and thankfully he holds it with no problem. I'm also really pleased because when it comes to his blaster rifle, he's able to get both hands on it, which I think is kind of crucial for a Stormtrooper. It's one of the very minor gripes that I had with the Boba Fett, is that I really struggled to get him to do this, so it's nice and easy with the Stormtrooper, no issues whatsoever. And I think the blast effect is really very cool. It is the exact same one that we saw with Boba Fett. It is painted a different colour, but it is more or less the same thing. But it looks really cool. I think it creates quite a cool effect. And it can be applied to any of the barrels of any of the weapons that the Stormtrooper comes with. And it always looks in proportion and well sculpted. And then finally, here he is with the long-range blaster rifle, which again looks really cool. And you'll notice as well, there's actually a little bit of extra texturing, a little bit extra shading running through the barrel of the weapon and across the grip as well, just to give it that little bit more texture, a little bit more worn, make it look a bit more used, which is fantastic. And then we come to the gun holster. I did say I'll come back to this because this is my one gripe, my only gripe with this figure, is that the gun holster doesn't seem to be large enough to place any of the weapons in. Now, I think it's meant to be primarily used for the blaster rifle, but I did try it with the pistol, and no luck. Sadly, I can't get it in there. This holster, this pouch, is a very hard plastic. It's not flexible, it's not very malleable, so you really can't do too much with it. Things only get worse with the blaster rifle. I can just about force it in there, but it's not going all the way, and this doesn't really work at all. Now, it could be that I'm just approaching this completely wrong, and maybe I'm missing something really obvious, but I've really struggled to get this to work, and I've got to be honest, that is going to hurt the figure ultimately. So in terms of my final thoughts, I really love this figure. Now I'm going to be straight up and honest with you and say I'm going to give it a 4-star. It was so close to being another 5-star figure, but I've given it 4-star because that issue with the gun holster has really dragged it down for me, and I just don't understand why that is the case. But if it wasn't for that, it would be a 5-star figure because I absolutely love this figure. I love the proportions of it. I love him being in this 7-inch scale. I really like this line, I've got to be honest. I love the attention to detail in the costume, in the weapons. I love the blast effect that he comes with and all his various bits and pieces. And the fact that obviously there is no hindrance to his articulation. You're able to get the most out of this figure. It's just fantastic. So for me, yeah, this is a wonderful figure. I really like him. He's my favourite ever Stormtrooper, which is high praise because I've had quite a few across the years, but this one, I think, in my opinion, is the best. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.